Welcome to Observations, an open conversation about women's health. This is a space where physicians, patients, and other experts can sit down and have honest, evidence-based dialogue that cuts through the media bias and brings clarity back to maternal care and how we can care for both patients, mother and preborn child. With each episode, we will have real stories, real science, but also real questions about women's health today. From clinical insights to lived experiences, to aligned perspectives, and yes, also respectful disagreements. This is our goal, to bridge the gap between physician and patient, to empower informed decision-making, and bring back and elevate compassionate, fact-driven care. Now, a quick note before we dive in. Not every guest on the podcast is going to represent the views or positions of Applog, but we believe that having open and honest conversations are going to make us better. So, grab your coffee, settle in, and let's get into today's observation.
This annual keynote is named after Donna Harrison, Applog's current Director of Research and CEO Emerita. And joining us tonight to speak about his latest book, Seeking Truth and Speaking Truth, is Robert P. George. Professor George is the McCormick Professor of Jurisprudence and Director of the James Madison Program at Princeton University. He has also taught at the Harvard Law School. In addition to his academic leadership, he has served on several national and international bodies, including the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, the President's Council on Bioethics, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and UNESCO's World Commission on the Ethics of Science and Technology. A former judicial fellow at the U.S. Supreme Court, he has received numerous honors for his scholarship and public service. Professor George is a prolific author whose work spans major academic journals and leading newspapers. His books include Making Men Moral, In Defense of Natural Law, The Clash of Orthodoxies, Conscience and Its Enemies, and his recent collaboration with Cornel West, Truth Matters. He holds degrees from Swarthmore, Harvard, and Oxford, along with more than 20 honorary doctorates. Beyond his scholarship, he serves on multiple nonprofit boards, edits the New Forum book series at Princeton University Press, and remains an influential voice on law, ethics, and public life. Dr. George has no conflicts of interest to disclose, and as I begin a conversation with him, his only request is I don't call him Bob, so I'm not going to call you Bob. Come on up. Christina, the podium's going to stay?
It's going to stay there.
Oh, we'll just slide over. Okay, perfect. Great. So I mentioned this book, Seeking Truth and Speaking Truth, Law and Morality in Our Cultural Moment. Here it is. All right. So let's start off by, tell us how this book came to be and why did you write it at this particular cultural moment?
Well, Susan, I'll be happy to offer some reflection on my book and explain why I wrote it. But first, let me thank you for this opportunity and very special words of thanks to Christina Francis and to Donna Harrison, and I'm especially honored that this lecture is in honor of Donna. Mm-hmm. And I want to say thanks and congratulations to all of you who are involved with Applog. I go around the country and I give lots of speeches. Some are to conservative groups, some are to more liberal groups. But I always say that the principle, the foundational principle of all sound morality, is the principle of the profound, inherent, and equal dignity of each and every member of the human family. And guess what? Everybody agrees with that. But it's one thing to honor that principle theoretically or merely notionally. It's quite another thing to honor it existentially and practically. And what I love about Applog and the Applog people is that you honor it existentially and practically. In other words, you really honor it. And that takes courage today. That takes courage, and I applaud you for your courage, and I thank you for the witness that all of you give. Now, about that book. There it is. Makes rather a good doorstop. Look at how thick that thing is. So it brings together essays that I have written over the past decade or so, integrated around a set of central themes having to do with philosophy, with jurisprudence, especially constitutional law, and with cultural matters. It also reflects the teaching that I've done, especially over the past decade or so. I'm in my 41st year of teaching, all at Princeton. It's the one and only job that I've ever, full-time job that I've ever had. I've had a few visiting stints up at Harvard, but Princeton is my one true full-time job, 41 years. And over the past decade, I've been talking about these themes with my students in my courses in constitutional interpretation, civil liberties, philosophy of law, and moral and political philosophy. And so what I wanted to do in reshaping these essays and integrating them and turning them into a book was to actually just try to bring the reflection that I had been doing in my courses and with my students to a broader public. I know there are lots of people out there who are interested in these things, but don't happen to be Princeton undergraduates. Well, I want to reach them too. And so we put the essays together, and Counter Books invited me to do it, and we put the essays together really to send that message. Now, I hope that everybody will read the book, but if there's a special target audience, you parents and grandparents out there, it's advanced high school students and college students. It addresses issues that really matter for them existentially and personally. So I'd like to get the book in the hands of as many people in that generation as possible. That generation is searching. The generation that is coming into college now and that is in college now is not the same as the generation we had in college even 5 years ago. There's been what we in academia call the vibe shift. Does that phrase mean anything to you, the vibe shift? Well, all that dogmatism that we saw in our students 5 years ago, all that kind of relentless authoritarianism in the name of liberty we saw a few years ago, that seems to have dissipated. And this new generation of sort of 18 to 24-year-olds are searchers. They're not so sure that they've already got the truth on everything. They want to hear more. They want to hear competing perspectives and competing points of view. So really the focus of the book is for them.
So as I have this conversation with you, I want to use the book as the framework, and in a little while I have some slides that have some quotes from it I want you to respond.
Oh, okay.
But this is one of the things you say in the book. You say, you argue that the medieval period, the age of faith, and the European Enlightenment period, the age of reason, has now been followed by a modern age of feeling. So can you share more about the age of feeling and how emotions have become the central source of truth for so many?
Sure, and this again reflects my engagement with students, especially over the past decade or so, or 15 years, decade and a half. The historians are fond, as I'm sure you all know, of breaking up the epochs into the age of this and the age of that. And so they tell us that the medieval period was the age of faith. Now, that's a bit of an oversimplification, but it's not straightforwardly false. There is a sense in which the medieval period was the age of faith, whether we're talking about the great Christian or Jewish or Islamic thinkers of the medieval period. These are thinkers who made the touchstone of truth, who regarded faith as the touchstone of truth, the touchstone of justice, the touchstone of right. Are we on the right track? Well, how does our thinking line up with the Scripture? Or how does our teaching line up with the traditions of our faith? Now, we have to be careful here. It is an oversimplification. And to the extent that it suggests that the medievals were not people who highly prized and valued reason, well, then it's very misleading. And if you know anything about medieval Christian, Jewish, or Islamic thought, you know that these thinkers prized reason. They saw faith and reason in harmony, not in conflict. But it's nevertheless true that they gave pride of place to faith. Well, these same historians say, well, then along comes the Enlightenment, and that's the age of reason, sometimes called the age of science. Now, what do they mean? Well, they mean that for the great Enlightenment figures, whether they're German or French or Scottish or English, the touchstone of truth, and therefore of justice, of goodness, of right, is conformity with the findings of rational inquiry. So there's certainly an element of truth in the idea that the Enlightenment, or the various European Enlightenments, there were really multiple Enlightenments, were the age of reason. Now, again, you need to be careful here because it can become misleading. If you take that phrase, age of reason, to mean that all of the great Enlightenment thinkers deprecated or denigrated faith, you would be wrong. And many of the great thinkers of the Enlightenment were people of profound faith. You start the list with Sir Isaac Newton, right? Now, there were some atheists and secularists, figures like Voltaire and so forth, but it was a mixed story. There were religious as well as secular figures who were important in the Enlightenment. Nevertheless, there's an element of truth, no doubt about it, in the idea that the Enlightenment was the age of reason. Okay, so I ask myself, if the medieval period is the age of faith and the Enlightenment is the age of reason, in what age do we live? Well, here, I very much regret to say, when we think of what people today, especially younger people, not exclusively, but especially younger people today, regard as the touchstone of truth and therefore of justice and therefore of right and good, it's not faith. And it's not reason. It's feeling. It's a kind of visceral sense. Mm-hmm. It's how I feel about this or that, or how it makes me feel. I mean, we're even in the crazy condition of supposing that whether I am male or female, a man or a woman, depends on how I feel. If I feel like a man, I'm a man. If I feel like a woman, I'm a woman. That's the age of faith, the age of feeling on steroids. But more broadly, people don't treat faith as the touchstone of truth. People don't treat reason as the touchstone of truth, at least many people, especially many young people. They treat feeling. And the problem with that is that feelings are subjective. And these subjective feelings that we all have are extremely unreliable guides to truth, to justice, to right. As all the great thinkers of history, whether in antiquity, think of Socrates, think of Plato, think of Cicero, think of Aristotle, or the medieval period, think of Maimonides, Aquinas, Robbie, or the Enlightenment period, think of Locke or Montesquieu or any of those figures. What the theme of all of those figures is we can't simply trust our unreflective feelings. They can go wayward. They can lead us astray. We need some standards by which to judge our feelings, sound or unsound, reliable or wayward. As Plato teaches us, in the properly ordered soul, what a secular person would say, the properly ordered personality, but Plato doesn't resist saying the soul himself. In the well-ordered soul, the properly ordered soul, yes, passion or emotion is present, but it's under the control of reason. Things go haywire when emotion or feeling gets the whip hand over reason. When that happens, then what role does reason play? Well, reason doesn't tell us what we should want or what we should do. All reason can do is play the purely instrumental role of helping us to figure out how more efficiently to get what we want, whatever it is we happen to want. Reason in that instrumentalized and harnessed role can, sure, tell Mother Teresa how to bring greater care and comfort to the people that she's rescuing on the streets of Calcutta, but it can also tell Hitler how to get more people into those gas chambers and ovens. So we should stay a million miles away from the idea that feeling, emotion, is a source, a reliable source of truth about anything, but certainly about justice or goodness or right and wrong, virtue and vice. And yet, here's where we find ourselves today. People treating feeling as if it is a reliable guide to truth. And it leads so many people down the path to disaster.
So let's bring the age of feeling into medicine. Yeah. So how do you believe the age of feeling with emotions as that central source of truth has impacted medicine, particularly when you consider various approaches to morality, such as natural law, utilitarian, and Kantian approaches?
Oh, we're going to get into the fancy philosophical stuff, yeah. I love that reference to Hippocrates in the new project that you were talking about there, because what is, after all, Hippocratic medicine? Hippocratic medicine, as I understand it, is medicine whose, if I can use this Greek word, then I'll define it for you, telos, whose end, whose goal, whose purpose, whose point, whose telos is health. Its telos is not making you feel good about yourself.
Right.
It's making you healthy when you had been unhealthy, right? Or it's preserving you in the healthy state you're in. The purpose of medicine is not to enable you to fulfill or act on your desires. Your desires may be good or they may be bad. Until those desires are subjected to rational scrutiny, you don't know whether those are desires that you should be acting on or not. So medicine should not be in the business, at least in any fundamental sense, of helping people to get what they want, whatever it is they happen to want. Since I feel in my interior, I have an interior sense that I'm female, I then have a dysphoria about my body because it doesn't fit my image of what I am actually inside. Therefore, you should give me puberty blockers and hormones and surgical procedures to make me feel the way I want to feel, or to make me feel better. No, the point of true medicine, of Hippocratic medicine, is health. It's not about feeling. Let me tell you something else, Susan, about feeling, and the treatment of feeling as the touchstone of truth. It might sound initially liberating. Yeah, freedom to do what you want. If I identify truth with how people feel, then you feel one way and I feel another way. So I should respect your liberty to do what you want based on your feelings, and you should respect my liberty to do what I want based on my feelings. I mean, you probably even heard people make that kind of argument in freshman philosophy class or at a cocktail party. But what actually happens? We just had a recent experience with it during this whole woke period, right? What happens is that subjective view of morality, far from becoming the underwriter of a regime of freedom, becomes ruthlessly authoritarian. It's what gave us cancel culture. It's what gave us probably the most devastating attack on freedom of speech in academia in the whole history of modern academic life in the United States of America. In your own professions, I'm sure you all felt and perhaps continue to feel that sometimes you have to self-censor. There's some truths that you know that you can't speak because of this sense that you'll be offending people who would then take it out on you professionally.
Sure.
Well, that's not liberty. That's not liberal. That is authoritarianism. Ironically, that very subjectivism, which was so often defended, and to this day is defended in the name of liberty, is utterly authoritarian.
Yeah, and when you think about medicine, oftentimes it's the patient that the greatest good is their autonomy and how they feel, and we as providers are supposed to provide what they want.
Yeah, that is the road to perdition. That's right. great dear friend and mentor, the great Leon Kass, who's chairman of the President's Council on Bioethics when I was serving under the Bush administration on that council, would constantly drive home the point that the purpose of medicine is not to make you feel good, it's to make you healthy. Mm-hmm. It's to restore health, it's to maintain health. And health is not a subjective experience. It's an objective reality, an objective good. Even in the domain of mental health, we're talking about an objective good. And once we begin to treat it as if it's a subjective reality that is a matter of feelings, then we are on the road to doing really bad things.
Yeah.
And the whole history of medicine tells us that. I mean, think of the witness given over the years in the face of all these crazes by the great Paul McHugh. Do people know who Paul McHugh is of Johns Hopkins Hospital, the great psychiatrist? Paul McHugh, a great truth teller in the face of craziness, all done in the name of medicine. It's because Paul McHugh always kept his focus on the patient's objective health, not on subjective feelings.
Last year, at this very same conference, Dr. Farr Curlin and Chris Tollefson were here, and they were our keynote. And I know one of your chapters, I think, has Dr. Tollefson is
my co-author. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if you recall, Dr. Curlin defines health not as how we often say well-being, which is, you know, emotional, physical, financial, spiritual. He defined it as the functioning of the human body. So our duty is, and the purpose of medicine is to restore that health as you're describing it.
That's right. Now, that does not mean that the concept of mental health is a fraud. It's not.
Absolutely not. Right.
You know, but what you want are people who understand mental health itself as an objective good, right, not a matter of subjective feelings.
Right.
People like, I know the great Dr. Aaron Cariotti, who's here. I already mentioned Paul McHugh. There are people in the mental health field who've kept the focus steadily on that objective reality. Where psychiatry has gone wrong time and time again is when it's lost that focus on the objective reality and basically pandered to this idea that mental health is a matter of subjective feeling.
Right. And I think that was the point of Dr. Curlin and Tollefson.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was.
So you brought up, what was the name of the commission when you were for the Bush administration?
Under President Bush, that was the U.S. President's Council on Bioethics, originally chaired by Leon Kass.
So I did a little bit of research, and you've talked about ACOG a little bit.
I did more than talk about them.
I have a slide deck that has a quote. I don't know if you all can pull that up. It's the next slide. Oh, that's okay. I don't have it. You can take that down just for a second.
Although that's true.
I know. I'm coming to that one next.
Okay.
That one's coming up. But so basically, ACOG has a committee opinion number 385 titled "The Limits of Conscientious Refusal in Reproductive Medicine."
Oh yeah, they wanted to force everybody to be an abortionist. That was amazing.
Yep. It was first issued in 2007, but it was reaffirmed in 2023. And it stated that while physicians have a right to refuse services that violate their conscience, this right is limited. And they said we had a duty to refer if we weren't going to perform the abortions, and that patient autonomy takes precedence over health care professionals' conscience. So you had some thoughts about that, so share that with our audience.
Is it going to come up?
So his quote, I added it earlier, but maybe it didn't make it to it, but it's okay. Do you remember what the context of?
So the woman who appeared before us she was a very distinguished doctor. If I remember recalling correctly, she was connected with one of the great medical schools that begin with a C, and I don't remember whether it was Columbia or University of Chicago, or anyway, she was a very distinguished person from a very famous medical school, and she was associated with this group, ACOG, and they were giving testimony. She was the person testifying on their behalf, and she was there to tell us that sound principles of medicine did allow for some conscientious objection by physicians to the provision of healthcare services. Interesting question, what counts as healthcare services? But healthcare services, but that there were strict limits to these, and those limits properly understood, meant that even if you were unwilling yourself to perform an abortion, you had to be willing to refer for an abortion, and if not, you could be either disciplined or basically expelled from the practice of medicine. And this nice lady, very smart lady, is sitting there in front of us, and I just decided to ask her, since she was our witness, where'd this idea come from? I mean, what's the basis of this idea? And she said, well, it's medicine. I said, ma'am, I'm a philosopher, and that really looks to me not like a medical opinion about human health. That looks to me like a moral opinion. That looks to me like a philosophical opinion. So you're here, are you not as an expert in philosophy, happens to be my field. You're here as an expert in medicine? And she said, yes. Not in philosophy. No. I said, well, you've just given us a philosophical principle. What gives you the authority to offer that? And she said, no, it's a medical principle. I said, okay, so what's the medical basis? What's the biological basis for the, well, the poor woman. I mean, you know, you got to call these people. I mean, I didn't want to be mean, but she was there pretending to be offering an objective matter of scientific fact, when in fact she was peddling an ideology. And these people get away with this, including in medical education, time and time and time again. Enough.
Yeah.
And so they need to be called out on it. And it doesn't take a philosopher like me to call them out. A medical person should know what has its basis in medicine and what has its basis, whatever it is, if there's a basis at all, somewhere else beyond the practice of medicine. So I think it's just, you know, high time that we just stop putting up with that kind of nonsense. And organizations like ACOG need to kind of pay a price, need to be slapped down. If they're going to send people up there to peddle that kind of nonsense, the person has to go home with his or her tail between her legs saying, we can't continue to do this. You know, we're going to have to give them actual science.
You know, so my medical practice is in 4 pregnancy centers, and all my patients have an unplanned pregnancy. And I think one of the most common things I get is the women will say to me after I've done the informed consent, what we call options counseling or coaching, they'll say to me, all right, I get you don't want to do my abortion, but why won't you refer me? Mm-hmm. And where I always go to is I say, as an OBGYN, I take care of 2 patients. And if the purpose of medicine is health and healing, I don't want to send you somewhere where I know one of my patients will lose his or her life and the other may be harmed. And there has never been any pushback when I say that, because I'm not coming from a place of judgment or shame of their decision, but I'm coming from a place of, I'm taking a stand as a physician. This is why I'm not doing that, because it doesn't align with the purpose of medicine.
Well, it's precisely right. You hit the nail on the head. It's just not about medicine.
Right.
Yeah, I can only speak with authority. If I'm a medical doctor and not a philosopher, I can only speak authoritatively from the medical perspective. And if this is not a medical matter, if it's some other kind of matter, then you're in the wrong place. You know, you're going to have to talk to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Francis, our timer's not working. How are we doing with time just as I enter this new series of questions?
You've got like 17 minutes.
Awesome. Could you bring that slide up that you had before? Because I'm going to take some quotes from Professor George's book and get him to respond. So you had it up. It was my first one that had a quote.
While we're waiting for that, you talked about your work in the pro-life pregnancy. Yes.
Yeah.
God bless the people who do this work. It's magnificent. It's truly God's work. It's the Lord's work, and it's just wonderful. And I always try to do whatever I can to support those centers, speak at their dinners and things like that. And part of that is because my dear beloved late mother, who recruited me into the pro-life movement when I was an adolescent, a year or two before Roe versus Wade, was herself very active. She's not a medical person. She didn't even have a college education, but she was always active at the local pregnancy care center, taking care of girls. She would refer to them as in trouble. That was the phrase she would use. There's a girl in trouble, and I've got to help her. And that was my mother, who was dedicated both to the political work, but also to the bringing practical care and support, moral, spiritual, financial support to women and their babies. And so I have a special place in my heart for them. I also noticed that it's overwhelmingly women who do it and who staff the centers. In fact, when I was recruited into the group, I was born and brought up in West Virginia, north central West Virginia, in the heart of Appalachia. I come from that background. Both of my grandfathers were coal miners and so forth. But thinking back to that, when I first joined the local pro-life group with my mom, it was about 20 people regularly at the meetings. There was a Catholic priest, 2 male philosophy graduate students who I just really looked up to. I couldn't understand a thing they said, but it sounded so cool. And me. And then all the rest of the people involved were women. Women have been at the foundation and in the leadership of this movement, especially when it comes to helping other women. And I just think that's a wonderful thing. And you made me think of my mother when you talked about your own work.
Oh, thank you. You know what? If you happen to, in any capacity, work in the pregnancy center world, whether you are a medical director or you're here and work in a pregnancy center, stand up, because you all deserve a huge round of applause.
Oh, look at how many. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to take some quotes from the book and get his response. 2 of them are from the preface. That's how good the book is. All right. So, there is harmony rather than conflict or ever tension between faith and reason, and that faith can and should be reasoned and reasonable.
Yeah, there I am. So what I'm saying there, far less eloquently, is what the late Pontiff, Pope John Paul II, said very, very beautifully when he opened his great encyclical, Fides et Ratio, which simply translates faith and reason, with the following image. He said, faith and reason are the 2 wings on which the human spirit ascends to contemplation of the truth. And you know, growing up in the heart of Appalachia, I did a lot of hunting. And my boyhood was a very Huck Finn boyhood. It was hunting and fishing and playing bluegrass music. I'm still a bluegrass banjo player. That was my.
We should have had him do that.
But I bring
entertainment afterwards.
Be careful. You never have to ask me twice to play the banjo.
Did you bring it?
I didn't bring it, unfortunately. But when I think of that image, I remember, you know, as a kid, bird hunting, and sometimes you would wound a pheasant or a ruffed grouse or something like that, and one wing would be damaged. And the other wing might be perfectly fine, but the bird's down on the ground. And that bird will keep flapping really hard. That one good wing, he's going to try to get off the ground, but he flaps that wing as hard as he possibly can. But instead of getting off on the ground, he just goes off the ground. He just goes around in a circle, because it really does take both wings. And that's, I think, what John Paul was teaching us. When it comes to faith and reason, far from being enemies or in conflict or even in tension, these 2 wings are mutually interdependent. They're both needed to get to contemplation of the truth. The 2 wings on which the human spirit ascends, he says, to contemplation of truth. I mentioned at the beginning that the principle, the foundational principle of all sound moralities, the principle of the profound, inherent, and equal dignity of each and every member of the human family. That principle we can trace back in our own sort of historical lineage to the very first book. In fact, the very first chapter of the very first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, where we're told that the human being, unlike the brute animals, the human being, though made from the mere dust of the earth, mortal stuff that will die and dissolve, is nevertheless made in the very image and likeness of God. Now, how are we to understand that? All right, we're given this as a proposition. You and you and you and me and you are made in the image and likeness of God. But what does it mean? Does it mean that God has 5 fingers on each of 2 hands and hair on his head and a nose? No, it can't be me. It can't be that. Well, then what can it mean? Notice what we're now doing. we're reasoning. What we're now doing is philosophy. You know, we've got a religious teaching, but now we're doing philosophy in order to understand it. You see the complementarity working. And when we reflect, we think, well, what is God-like about the human being is not our physical reality. What is God-like is our powers of reason and freedom. Unlike the brute animals, we human beings can do what God does, as depicted in the book of Genesis. That is, envisage states of affairs that do not exist, see the point, the intelligible purpose, the value of bringing them into existence, and then to act freely and on the basis of the reason we perceive for performing the action, not just on instinct or impulse like a brute animal, to bring that state of affairs into existence. It's in respect of our reason and freedom that we are in fact godlike. So you see there faith and reason really working together. It's just a very good example to enable us to contemplate, to understand the truth.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, second quote from the preface. This is a bigger one, but this is really important for this audience. Intellectual freedom, open inquiry, robust civil discourse, and openness to genuine dialogue with people who see things very differently from the way we ourselves see them provide our best shot at getting to the truth. We should tolerate, and in a truth-seeking spirit, we should engage ideas we think are wrong, even badly, indeed tragically wrong. We should do that not because there is no truth, but precisely because the free exchange of ideas is the best way available for us for getting at the truth, deepening our knowledge and understanding, and achieving that rarest and most precious of all categories of truth, namely wisdom.
Did I say that?
You did.
Wow, that's great. That's so true. Absolutely, absolutely. We have nothing to fear, quite the opposite when it comes to robust inquiry, to being more than just polite, but genuinely civil interlocutors with people who disagree with us, even about the most important questions, the big important questions, even about the life and death matters that we ourselves, of course, are at this conference to contemplate. I have no problem, I've never had a problem engaging with my Princeton colleague, fellow philosopher Peter Singer. Now, some of you probably know who Peter Singer is, right? Peter Singer is the famous utilitarian philosopher, one of the most famous philosophers on the face of the earth, who believes not only in the moral permissibility of abortion all the way up through 9 months, but has explicitly argued in a paper, widely disseminated paper called Killing Babies Isn't Always Wrong, that parents, all parents of newborn infants, even perfectly healthy newborn infants, should be given 28 days to decide, after birth, to decide whether to kill the baby or not. That is an abominable thing to believe. And yet, I have not had any problem engaging with Professor Singer in a civil manner. He's had no problem engaging with me, knowing that I'm at the polar opposite place on that issue, not just on infanticide, but on abortion. I have encouraged, I'm going to scandalize you here perhaps, but it's true, I've encouraged my students to take his classes. I want them to hear his arguments. I want them to hear the best arguments on the other side. And to his credit, he's encouraged his students to take my classes. And when we've engaged, whether in person or in print, I've always found my understanding of the issues deepens, even though he's not managed to change my opinion, nor alas have I managed to change his opinion. It turns out he and I both have the same belief when it comes to free speech and the importance of engaging people on people who are opposed to your position on even profound issues. And so that gives us some common ground. But I do think that understanding can be deepened, even when we're in the right, by engaging with people who disagree with us.
Agreed. All right, next slide, please. Okay, I went to page 315 from the preface. The virtue we lack, and it is an indispensable virtue, is courage.
Not in this room. These people don't lack courage.
And we must recover it. I want you to speak to our next generation on this. Our young Men and women must regain it, not to defend us from a hostile foreign power armed with nuclear weapons, but to protect us from a far more dangerous foe, a truly deadly enemy, our own worst selves. So, before you answer it, we've got an audience full of current practitioners, professionals in the healthcare field of many sorts. We also have many in training. How many do we have? About 60, 70? Go ahead and stand up and show Professor George if you're in training.
Excellent. Yeah.
Student or resident.
Yeah, wonderful. Bravo.
Okay. So I am not a naturally brave person, but God has called me to do some awful brave things since I met Donna Harrison. Where are you, Donna? I got invited to a dinner. Be careful if you get invited to an APLOG dinner in your state. I got invited to a dinner by Donna, and she has a saying that courage is contagious. And one of the things you often hear from the students is that when they come, they don't feel alone. They feel like they can go into a field and be pro-life. Talk to us a little bit about this quote and what it means.
Well, first I'll say that Donna's absolutely right, that courage is contagious. That's the good news. The bad news is cowardice is contagious too. If our young men and women see us, the grown-ups, especially when we're in pretty secure positions, nevertheless cowering in the corner, afraid to speak our minds, worried about what other people will say about us, worried about losing friends, worried about being marginalized or stigmatized, that cowardice is contagious too. They will adopt that cowering position, yielding to bullying and intimidation. It's up to us to set the example of courage for them. So this particular quote, I'm guessing, comes from a chapter in the 4th section of Seeking Truth and Speaking Truth.
It's Alexander's
Solzhenitsyn. In that section, I talk about some of my heroes.
Yes.
And by heroes, I mean people who exemplified in their lives what I am trying to preach in the book to my students and to my readers, and that is that all of us, not just professors, all of us are called to be determined truth seekers and courageous truth speakers. That's common. That common in the sense that it's uncommon in reality, but it's common to all of us as a calling, as a vocation. So I look at 4 or 5 people, either from today or from the past, who I think exemplified that. They were determined truth seekers and courageous truth speakers. And one of those was the great Soviet dissident and writer, novelist, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Are some of you my age old enough to remember Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who went into the Soviet gulag because he spoke truth to power, and then the Soviets finally released him. He came to the United States as an exile in the United States, left his beloved Russia, was thrown out, was exiled. And he spoke at the 1978 Harvard graduation. Now, that wasn't my graduation year, but I was there, not in the yard, but beyond the walls, and I heard it over the speaker, the loudspeaker system. And that became a very famous address. People expected Solzhenitsyn to come to Harvard. Remember, it's 1978, height of the Cold War. Expected him to come and denounce and condemn the Soviet Union, and he did that. As a gangster regime, as a corrupt, monstrous, evil regime. What they weren't counting on at Harvard was that he would also critically examine us in the West, our pornography, our cowardice, the decay of our culture, by then already, sexual revolution, destroying the family. Out of wedlock birth rates, unknown to human history. The promiscuity, and he just unloaded with both barrels. Well, Harvard wasn't prepared for that. That's not what they had. Not what they had bargained for. But this great figure, this towering figure, came, and he is the one who said, and I'm just basically quoting him here. He's the one who said, "What I find lacking in the West is courage." The courage to stand up not only to the Soviet Union, which is very important. We need the courage to stand up to Soviet aggression. It was unclear at that point who was going to win the Cold War, but also to deal with the vices that have come to dominate our own culture here in the West. And that's my message to our students and young men and women generally. And it's necessary, I think, to preach the virtue of courage, but it's even more necessary to model it. And it goes to Donna's point about that, it's being contagious. Our students learn more from what they see us do than from what they hear us say.
Right.
So we've got to be the models for them. And it's not just like the politicians or the celebrities, God help us, or the public intellectuals. The modeling has to be from mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and auntie and uncle and teacher and pastor and coach, the people who are immediate in the lives of our children and our young men and women who know them by name and who they know by name. That's, I think, going to be the key to getting us out of our current condition. Yeah, another one?
I do. Can you answer it in 42 seconds?
Oh, okay, I'll do my best.
All right, one more. Could you switch it to the next slide? Anyone that succumbs to the intimidation and bullying, anyone who acquiesces or goes silent out of fear, not only harms his or her own character and fails in his or her duty to bear faithful witness to truth, he or she also makes things harder for others.
Well, exactly right. Exactly right. And there is nothing more painful to me than to see academics, and not just academics with tenure, like myself, or in endowed chairs, like myself, people who have the most secure jobs in the world, save perhaps for federal judges, who nevertheless allow themselves to be bullied and intimidated into silence and sometimes even acquiescence, knowing that something's wrong, and yet unwilling to say so, unwilling to speak out. And what are they worried about? Their graduate students? They're worried their graduate students are going to say nasty things about them or not like them. It's that kind of cowardice that I'm talking about here. If you succumb to that bullying, that not only damages your own character, it makes you a worse person from the moral point of view. It's also a failure to support other people, especially young people, by bearing the faithful witness that we are all called to bear for causes that we have to remember are greater than ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's a great way for me to segue into Dr. Cerrucci, who's going to lead some Q&A from you, but I would like to say, so I had the privilege of being the student of Dr. Farquharson when I spent the year at Duke Divinity School in their theology, medicine, and culture program.
Wonderful man.
We saw each other about a month ago, and I was telling him that I had the honor of having a conversation with you this year, and he said that Dr. George's work is the reason that he can do his job at Duke. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Chris is going to come up.
Chris is going to come up, so yeah. Well, while we do that, I really appreciate that, Susan. I really appreciate Dr. Curlin's kind comment. But again, if there's anything that I deserve credit for, it really goes to my mother. And it really exemplifies the point. I had such a great role model in my mom who got involved in the pro-life. It wasn't popular back then. I mean, it was never really popular in the age of abortion, right? But nevertheless, she knew what the right thing to do was, and she was going to go out there and do it. And, you know, she didn't have fancy academic credentials that she could, you know, kind of use as protective. I have those, right? I can kind of use those. She didn't have those. You know, she just went out there and stood up and took, you know, held up signs and took women into, you know, young women, girls into her home and just did the right thing because it was the right thing to do. And if I've modeled any of that myself, it's because she modeled it for me. Hi there.
Dr. George, that was just, thank you for that great call to courage.
Yeah.
And we have some great questions for you.
Great.
So, good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Cerrucci. I'm chair of the board of directors of APLOG, and I want to thank you for your questions. I want to thank you, Dr. George, for being here. So, our first question is our faith a handicap in trying to speak truth into the secular healthcare space? In other words, should we just exclusively make natural law arguments for against abortion?
Okay, yeah. So I think the concern motivating the question is that if I reveal my faith and the role of the faith in my own formation, then won't that undermine my witness to some extent or weaken it?
Right.
Because secular people who basically have control of the institutions will then write off my witness as being just subjective religious belief or something like that. I think that is a legitimate concern, and I think it's a very good reason that all of us need to be able to make the arguments without appeal to religious premises or religious authorities of any type. I think that's very important for us to be able to do that, and a lot of my work is trying to show people how to do that. But I also think that our own integrity requires that we not hide our faith. And here we have some great role models in the abolition movement, in the movement for women's rights in the good sense, in the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King could make the arguments from the Declaration of Independence, but he never hesitated also to make the biblical arguments. He would call for the universal brotherhood of man under the universal fathership of God. And I think that's a good model for us as well. I think we need to be able to win in the intellectual fist fight, where it's reason against reason, not going to appeal to any religious premises. But I don't think we should hide our faith either. At least that's what I've done in my own experience at Princeton. Nobody that I know of at Princeton is in any doubt about whether I'm a religious believer. They know I'm a religious believer.
Yes.
But why have I been able to flourish there in making these arguments? I think it's because I'm very happy to take on all comers, laying aside any religious authority. Let's just have the argument on the basis of who has the best reasons. That's where I want to have the argument.
I love that. Good advice. Thank you. So our next question, how do you recommend we have open, honest dialogue with people, such as pro-abortion people, who hold that our views have no place even in the discussion? For example, you talked about Peter Singer, but he respected your right to have an opinion.
Absolutely right.
We deal with a lot of people who do not respect our right to even have an opinion. So how do you recommend we deal with them?
Right. You call them out for the enemies of civil liberties that they are. So they present themselves as the great friends of liberty, right? Their whole claim is pro-choice, right? Pro-liberty, freedom, autonomy, blah, 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 right? Okay. When they try to eliminate people on the opposite side from them in debate, they actually expose themselves as the great enemies of civil liberties. I think it's probably fair to say that I have a reputation at Princeton, and perhaps even more broadly, for two things. One being the champion on my campus of the socially conservative views on life and marriage, but also the champion of free speech. And these days, I'm actually more strongly identified with the free speech cause on our campus than with the socially conservative cause, because that's the issue on our campus that's been front and center. I think that's a good place to be. I think if your colleagues understand that you are a champion of the pro-life cause and a champion of the civil liberties cause, and the whole reason you want to be in the debate is because you believe in the robust exchange of ideas as the best way to get at truth, and that you are prepared to argue without any appeal to authority of any kind beyond the authority of reason itself, I think that's a good place for you to be. And then let's make the other side look like the tyrants and demagogues and enemies of civil liberties that so often, you're right, so often they are. And then look out for the people who want to have a conversation. I've had a beautiful relationship for more than 20 years with my friend, Dr. Cornel West. Cornel and I have been teaching together and lecturing together and doing all sorts of things together now for two decades. And that's because I found him from the very beginning to be someone, despite our profound differences, who was genuinely interested in hearing a different point of view. There are such people, even in your professional worlds. Seek them out.
Good, I can hardly wait to find that person, because They're kind of hidden for us right now. Just great stuff. So I love this question, and I just lost it. But what is your advice for young people in the pro-life movement? And this person says they're 25 years old.
Mm-hmm. Don't hide. Don't hide. Don't imagine that, well, I have to wait till I get myself established, because there are all these screens and choke points where I can be cut off in my career. And I'll bear my witness down the line when I get that job, when I get that promotion, when I get that new status, when I get that new office. If you do that, the next thing you know, you're retired. I think the smartest thing I did in my career is right out of the starting blocks. From my first moment on the Princeton campus, when I was there for a job talk, I wasn't even there as a professor yet. I was just there to be interviewed, to be an entry-level tenure-track assistant professor. My first talk, I made clear that I'm pro-life and I'm pro-marriage as the union of husband and wife. And maybe that I got lucky because I got through the screen. I wasn't a victim of prejudice. In fact, I've lived a blessed life. I've not been a victim of prejudice. I mean, I know plenty of people who have been. And I'm not guaranteeing, I can't guarantee anybody that if you do it my way, you won't be cut off. But it meant that from the very moment I began my career, I was a free man. I could speak my mind. I didn't feel restricted about that. I was able to do it. And you know, sometimes your boldness will itself be the thing that commends you even to people who are hostile to you. I mean, gosh, did that guy do what I just thought he did? He came in for his job talk, and he attacked like a foundational principle of what we all believe in this community. And well, in my case, yeah, that's exactly what I did. But boy, it turned out to be the smartest thing I ever did. I was talking to some people about lunch about how I advise my graduate students. And I do advise my doctoral students, you know, all of whom have great ambitions for academic careers, but know that academia is very hostile to men. I mean, I have some liberal grad students, and I treat them no differently. But for the conservative graduate students, which is an awful lot of my graduate students, this is a real problem. But I give them the advice that I myself lived by. None of them want to hear it. It's the opposite of what they want to hear. They want me to say, hide, keep your head low, wait till you get a job, wait till you get tenure, wait till you get promotion, wait till you get the full professorship, wait till you get dean of the department, and then come out of the closet and fight. And not only do they not want to hear my advice, their parents really don't want them to hear my advice, because obviously, naturally, they're worried sick that, you know, that they're as a conservative, as a Christian, as an Orthodox Jew, you're in this hostile world, and here this professor who's got tenure is telling my kid, you know, to take all these risks, but I do. And so far, and I have a lot of graduate students, every single one of my graduate students has taken my advice, and all of them are flourishing. Now, that's no guarantee. I keep waiting. One of them is going to get hit at some point. But so far, it has worked for them. And again, the key thing, the beautiful thing is right out of the starting blocks, they are free. And if you're gonna be an academic, I mean, why do you go into academic life? I don't know what it is in medicine, but in academic life, you go into it to seek the truth, and then to speak the truth as best you understand the truth. I mean, if I felt I couldn't actually speak the truth, I'd go get a respectable job. I'd sell cars or insurance or something. So that's what I tell my students.
So Dr. George, I want you to know that I've already, since I've been here, talked to two young people who have been removed from their training programs, their residency programs, because of their positions, and have to seek another position. And I imagine these are not people who are overly vocal. They're just saying...
These are in academic institutions?
I don't know whether
well,
or not.
They're training programs, right? So
they've finished medical school and have entered a residency program.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it is it's a very difficult
So
situation.
in 2021, I and a group of my Princeton colleagues founded what is now a national organization called the Academic Freedom Alliance. We decided that since the AAUP had decided not to do its job,
yes,
that we would come in and
yes,
do it for them. And the Academic Freedom Alliance, and those of you who are affiliated with academic institutions, including medical schools, are very welcome to join. The Academic Freedom Alliance is based on Principle 5 of the NATO Charter, and that is we treat an attack on one as an attack on all. An attack on the academic freedom of one is an attack on all. And we will come guns blazing against any institution that violates the freedom. And we have, on occasion, represented non-members. So if those students are affiliated with anything that counts as an academic institution, please let them know to be in touch with me and the Academic Freedom Alliance. Well, their institutions will hear from the Academic Freedom Alliance and its lawyers.
Thank you for that. Okay, is there a healthy place for the role of feelings in refining our intuition?
Yes, but they've got to be tutored feelings, right? What there's not a place for are feelings that are simply brute feelings, because our brute feelings are just very unreliable. They may be, by their nature, positive feelings. Take, for example, compassion. In itself, by its nature, that's a positive, it's a feeling, but it's a positive feeling. But then think of the evil that can be done and has been done and is being done in the name of compassion. So yes, I'm not arguing. I've got great respect for the Buddhist tradition, for example, which I studied formally when I was a student in college, especially the Theravada tradition. I was actually able to study under a great master, the Jalkhan Rajavamuni. I've got great respect, but that's a tradition that says the road to enlightenment is the complete elimination of feeling, the complete elimination of desire, of passion, of any kind. Some in the West, some extreme forms of Stoicism also have the same advice. If we're gonna, our feelings are so wayward that if we're going to actually advance, we have to try to eliminate feelings. That's not my view. My view is not to eliminate feelings, but it's to bring feelings under the tutorship or under the governance of reason and faith, which I think are just much more reliable guides. Now, people cannot operate on the basis of simply bare beliefs. Now, consider this. I mean, if I have the bare belief, but nothing more than the bare belief, no emotional investment, just the bare belief that it would be a good thing to get the kids up in the morning, get them washed, get them dressed, get them fed, and get them off to school, no kid would ever get to school. You need some emotional investment to get it done. So that's why I don't want to eliminate feeling.
Sure.
But I don't want brute feeling to be allowed to be our guide. It'll sometimes take us in a good place. It will very often take us to a very bad place.
Very good. Well, our next questioner, speaking of feelings, says, your proposals make me feel threatened. How do we even talk to a generation whose truth is rooted in how they feel?
Yeah, that's the big challenge for us. I wish I had a recipe or a simple answer to the question. But again, I have found that the key thing is modeling it. Okay, so I'm known on my campus, which is pretty liberal campus, it's Princeton, right? I'm known on my campus. Sorry to keep being so self-referential, but I think I have some experience with this, right?
Absolutely.
So I have a reputation for not putting up with the claim that I won't consider that opinion, or I think that speaker should not be allowed to speak because he causes harm, or I don't think you should be able to advocate the pro-life view because it causes such pain to women who've had abortions or things like that. So I am totally known as a person who just won't give that idea so much as the time of day. And yet my courses are some of the largest in the university, oversubscribed, despite the fact that I'm notorious for waging a one-man war against grade inflation. And in my constitutional interpretation course with 140 students last semester, I didn't give a single A. So so I think if you establish that you're serious about this intellectually, they will come. Now, all of them know. There are going to be some kids who they just will not be willing to take your course or entertain a conversation with you if they regard you as unwoke. We're not going to be able to reach them. I just have no way of reaching them. But the majority of students, and especially now that we've had a generational change, we've had the vibe shift, students are much more open. So the difference between the 18 to 25-year-olds and the 25 to 32-year-olds is very significant today.
So There's a question, I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but there's a question about how you address these things with different age groups. So maybe you could discuss that.
Yeah. I think the proper term is age appropriate. You need to handle things in an age appropriate way. So the leader of the local Girl Scout, Brownie troop, a few years ago, asked me to give a lecture to her Brownie troop on the Constitution. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
That was one of the biggest challenges I've had in my intellectual life. These were little girls,
Yeah.
With their little brown things and and so I had to think about it, that it couldn't be the lecture I give in my constitutional interpretation class. So I just thought about, well, okay, what are the basics? With the kids, with the younger, we'll start with the fundamentals. And then if I had a little bit of an older group, so the basics are things like we got the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, we have the judicial branch. Okay, Sally, what do you think the difference is between the president and the Congress? Why do we have two? Why don't we just have a president? Why don't we just have a Congress? And then we could get somewhere in the conversation. But if I had a little older group, I'd add some nuances. And then if I get some seniors in high school, it's going to be much more nuanced. And with my college kids, I'll get into the full complexities of the questions. And I think it's the same with I remember when my mother first told me why she was going to the pro-life, she must have been like 11 at the time. And my mother first told me that she was in this pro-life group because we were fighting against abortion. There were people who wanted to make abortion. Again, this was before Roe, that there were people who wanted to make abortion legal, and we had to. And so I naturally asked my mother, well, what it is. And when she described it to me, I was just stunned.
Sure.
Because I couldn't remember my next brother in age to me because I was too small when he was born, but I remember the next three, and I knew my mother, when she was carrying those kids, I knew that it was a baby. It wasn't a rock. It wasn't a potato. It wasn't a rhinoceros. It was a baby in there,
Yeah.
and that was the elementary. So with little kids, if you have to discuss this issue at all, it's basically there. Sure. And as the kids get older, obviously you can get into more questions. Well, why, despite the fact that it's kind of obvious that it's a baby in there and not a rock or a potato or a rhinoceros, are there some people who think it's okay to kill the baby? And then I think you have to be honest with them and explain what people's motives are and why we think that's nevertheless, those are not sufficient reasons. Those don't win the day. Those should not be yielded to.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, so you're going to get a really hard one.
Oh, okay.
Isn't reason alone, without a biblical worldview, a subjective source of truth, much like feeling? And how do you address this for yourself and others?
Well, that's like the question, can an atheist be virtuous? If you're an atheist, don't you have to believe that life is ultimately meaningless? So how could you think that there's such a thing as honesty, integrity, and that we should? And the only way I know to answer that question is the way the Maine farmer up in Maine, the state of Maine, answered the question put to him by the sociologist who came up to study the culture of rural Maine. And the sociologist asked the farmer, well, Joe, do you believe in infant baptism? And he said, oh, yes, I've seen it done. Well, can there be virtuous atheists? I've seen it done. I think we have some people from secular pro-life here, some of the most profound, wonderful pro-life people. They are not religious. Yes. They're not religious people. And I've got my most pro-life colleague on the entire Princeton, well, not as if we got a lot of them, but we probably have 25 or so, but probably the most dedicated, strong, the one guy I have to actually pull him back, because sometimes he gets, is an atheist, is an unbeliever. Happened to have been adopted as a child, came by his pro-life views out of that experience, very honestly, out of that experience. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird to me. I agree, if you kind of think there's no source of the meaning of things, and yet I work with those people. My great friend, the late Nat Hentoff, this great pro-life activist, also a wonderful jazz critic and great civil libertarian. he went literally to his death not believing in God. But, and in fact, believing there probably is no God. And yet, he was deeply dedicated to the pro-life cause and to other virtuous causes. So I've seen it done.
Yes. Thank you. It seems like maybe God is, what's the phrase, eternity in our hearts. Even though we don't believe in God, there's still the mark of conscience and
that's exactly
morality.
what St. Paul says in the letter to the Romans, that there's a law written on the hearts,
Yes.
even of the Gentiles.
Yes.
And by the Gentiles, obviously, he means the people who don't have the law of Moses. And that understanding that he's implanted in the heart, that's what we philosophers call the natural law.
Yes.
That understanding is sufficient for God to be able to hold us accountable for our actions.
Amen. Well, Dr. George, this has been wonderful. Let's give
It's my
Dr. George
pleasure.
a big hand.
Thank you, and thank all of you. Thank you. Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope that you enjoyed today's episode of Observations and that it broadened your perspective on women's health and how we can care for both patients, mother, and preborn child. If you like this episode, make sure to give us a 5-star review where you can find your podcasts. Make sure that you like this on YouTube and subscribe to our channel for more episodes coming up. And if you have any suggestions on any topics that we should cover or guests that we should have on, make sure that you email us at media@applog.org. Again, thank you for joining us for today's observation, and we'll see you in our next episode.